Thank you very much. I'm always nervous when people clap before I started speaking because you haven't heard what I've got to say yet. Hopefully you clap me at the end as well. I'm Ian from Warwickshire Wildlife Trust, and I'm here just to talk about reimagining parks in the context of the climate and nature emergency. I'm here wearing a hoodie, looking a bit like a hoodlum, and you all look fabulous today, by the way. But my headshot in the magazine looks slightly different because I've shaved all my hair off now, so I thought I should label up so you know who a wildlife trust person looks like, and grow the beard just in case you're not quite sure as well. My aim today is to hopefully inspire you all to think about working collaboratively. Ultimately, Warwickshire Wildlife Trust manages lots of nature reserves across Warwickshire, Coventry and Solihull. But the theme of what I'm trying to talk about today is kind of a critical friend to the local authority partners that we work with. So we work with Warwickshire County Council, the districts and boroughs, and also Coventry and Solihull councils as well, who manage their green spaces. And we sit on the outside recognising the challenges that those guys face in terms of the budgets, the pressure they have from the world around them, the communities and the demands that people are placing upon them. And it's not an easy world. It's not an easy world that they're facing. But there is hope out there for everybody, and collaboration from our perspective is the solution to some of those challenges. So ultimately, the resources that we've all got only go so far. So working in partnership with somebody like a local wildlife trust or other NGOs that operate in this space, the National Trust, RSPB are also good eggs. You've got local groups as well that have a lot of expertise and specialisms. That can help park managers do more and help them achieve some of the challenges that they're facing. And the Wildlife Trust have a network of 47 separate charities around the UK. We all work collaboratively, but we're all independent. So wherever you've come from across the Midlands or further afield, you've got somebody that's close to you. So if you don't already actively engage with them, I hope that part of this conversation today will inspire you to reach out and to consider how that might work better in the future. Our strategy within the Wildlife Trust is built around 3 pillars: trying to make more space for nature, enable more people to be on nature's side, and to position nature as a solution to the challenges that we face, including the climate emergency, but also health and well-being and other challenges like that. And ultimately, we're trying to enable 30% of the UK land and sea to support nature by 2030 as part of that strategy. And when we start to talk about that as a context, what we're trying to emphasise is that we don't want to put a fence around that 30% and only allow wildlife in and not people, because we live on an island that is surrounded by people. And Warwickshire in particular has a lot of people living and working within that geography. So we need to be able to create sustainable change that allows nature to recover and enables us to adapt to climate change, but in a way that works for people as well. And so when we think about the complexity of the climate and nature emergency, it can be quite a depressing start to any talk that I give, which essentially is that we are now facing the next mass extinction of species on our planet. 16% of all species in the UK are now under threat from extinction, and they're going towards extinction because of the actions that humans are taking. Society is unfortunately having a massive impact on our natural world and the climate. And so we need to develop systems change and collective thinking to address some of those issues. And the further challenge behind that are 2 other components. The first is that the UK is one of the most nature disconnected communities on Earth, which means that we've lost the understanding as a society of what nature gives to us, and we interact with nature less on our daily lives compared to other countries. And that is a difficult context because it presents challenges for people wanting to even engage or recognise as an issue in the first place. The other factor in the context of that is that there's a shifting baseline syndrome. So that's all about you only appreciate what you have witnessed in your life, and we all are the same with that. Unfortunately, as wildlife disappears or the climate changes over generations, we can't appreciate what was there before. So you can look out of a train window or you can visit a park and see greenery and think there's lots of nature there, but actually the abundance of nature, the diversity of wildlife in any one space is less than it was before. And because we've got no reference point, it's hard to think about what we've lost already. And the generations that come after us are going to have more of a challenge with that unless we act now. We are genuinely the last generation that can do anything about this, because if species go extinct in our lifetime, it will be too late. So hopefully that's the end of the kind of negativity scene setting. The point from this point on is parks are the critical component to that in terms of the turnaround of society. Because in our space where the Wildlife Trust exists, we're encouraging people to interact with nature. We want people to visit our nature reserves, but there are unseen barriers. People don't connect with nature in their lives. Often they will have to travel to a nature reserve, and people will think, oh, that nature reserve is not for me because I don't know the Latin name of that bird, or I don't own a pair of wellies. And so parks and green spaces in urban environments in particular are the places where people can connect with nature and take that first step of appreciating nature. And as David Attenborough said, nobody's going to change their behaviour if they don't care for something. They're not going to care for something unless they've experienced it, and they're not going to experience it unless they take that first step. So actually, by enhancing wildlife in parks where people live, we can start people on that journey to turn the tide. And that's why parks, along with all of the other factors of urban cooling and public health and well-being, are critical to nature's recovery. I'm going backwards now, sorry. And so there's lots of things that we sort of have learned from the Wildlife Trust perspective in terms of how we can improve our own approach to this. And one of the things is learning from case studies, both in the UK and abroad. And this photo was taken on my family holiday in the summer in Austria, and they create magnificent parks at the top of their mountains that are ski resorts during the winter, and then in the summer they become outdoor play parks effectively. And a lot of Central Europe does outdoor play really well, and we kind of all know that. In some places they've got the climate to do it, but in other places they're just working with the resources that they've got. And the learning in this context for me is that every park and green space is unique, and you shouldn't try and sort of create a model that's going to be replicated everywhere, because you've got to consider the local conditions. For these sorts of things to be sustainable, you need to ensure that the public are going to appreciate that, and that takes careful planning and bespoke tailoring to each site. So what we've started to try and do in Warwickshire, working with the local authorities, some of which might be in the room today, is to increase the amount of conversations that we're having around the challenges that people are facing. Because both within the charity sector and the public sector, our challenges are similar. There's a shortage of funding, there are fewer grants available, it's harder to do what we used to do. We need to move with the times and embrace new technology. We've got a public that's becoming ever disconnected with the outdoors, but we still need to maintain those resources. And we're having challenges with communication within conflicting priorities within departments. Now, what we've found in a number of cases is that collaboration and communication between agencies has helped to address some of those things, because each organisation has a different skill to bring to the table. And through collaboration, we can achieve more of our shared interests. In the media, often, and certainly the national government's current rhetoric is often to pitch nature against people. So it's the blocker to development, or it's, the choice is either to support nature's recovery or for economic growth. And that really couldn't be further from the truth. We've got to try and help to demonstrate where we can have examples in the world where what is good for nature and what is good for us. And we can show that by managing parks in a more sustainable way, we can help nature thrive, but not fundamentally change people's use of the parks. And I'm going to share a couple of case studies in a bit of how we've been working with that across the wildlife trusts. In some cases with a big cash injection when we've been able to secure funding from people like the National Lottery, but in other cases winding down the intensity of the park management to enable people to enjoy the park whilst also allowing nature to recover. It was mentioned in the previous talk, health and well-being is often the critical route in here, because if people don't necessarily appreciate nature's intrinsic value, they can still benefit from being outdoors and accessing fresh air. We have a kind of a duty really as a collective bunch of organisations operating in this space to try and dial down the culture of feeling like you need to know every species if you're going to go for a walk in a country park or to a nature reserve. And the Wildlife Trust's communications and other organisations in our space are starting to move towards a position of kind of removing references to Latin names and recognising that actually it's better for people just to appreciate nature in the personal form that they want to accept it. If you're an expert in a particular species and you still want to go and do that, obviously that's fine. But it's about creating tailored journeys. And the exercises in the last talk where you kind of imagined experiences, that's what we're trying to do in a real world situation in a park. So our interpretation and our signage for some of the parks and green spaces that we have across Warwickshire and Coventry and Solihull is changing from kind of a list of the type of wildlife you might see and a long list of Latin names and what their ecology means, to more about actually connecting people with nature in that space. Standing next to a river, what can you hear? What can you smell? Imagine what this might have been like 100 years ago. How has it changed? And the first talk alluded to the power of trees in carbon sequestration, and the Wildlife Trusts obviously advocate for that. We want nature-based solutions to be part of the adaptation and mitigation for climate change. We also want to stress the role that other habitats can also play. So the right tree in the right place is obviously a well-known phrase. It's about working with the natural landscape to try and make these areas sustainable in the longer term. So many of you might be aware of the new local nature recovery strategy, the national government initiative to kind of map habitats across the UK. And the overall intention of that is to get a better understanding of where nature is and where the opportunities are to build those links and those connections in our landscape. Hedgerows and trees can provide that. Parks and green spaces can provide stepping stones for species as they're moving across the landscape. And given that we are one of the most nature depleted countries on Earth, we can't just rely on the sort of triple SIs and the higher value nature reserves to support nature into the long term. We need to try and design landscapes where nature can filter out through and exist in the farmland, in people's parks and gardens, as well as the nature reserves. And by thinking about it strategically at a landscape scale, we're supporting local authorities to try and consider what's right for the landscape context. So often park management starts with, well, let's have a look at a map of the site of the park. We'll look at all of the components within it. And sometimes the map doesn't even show what's around. It's just a highlighted map of the specific park. Certainly from a biodiversity perspective, trying to link that specific site, whether it be a park or a farm or a garden, into the wider landscape is critical. So what we do within the Wildlife Trusts, when people contact us and say, I really want to help nature, what should I do? Our first question is just go on Google and see what's near to you in terms of wildlife. If you have a park or a garden that is close to ancient woodland, considering the species that might utilise that woodland that might then also be able to benefit from being in your green space is really helpful. Trying to attract species in, creating a pond on a green space where the next pond is 3 miles away is going to have limited short-term benefits for wildlife because it's out of the reach of the movement of toads and other amphibians and things like that. So we need to work together to think about this landscape context, and that's where collaboration comes in, because there's a lot of expertise in other organisations, but it's also where multi-agency conversations can start to be had with the likes of Network Rail, National Grid and National Highways, and also other departments within the council to try and join up some of the thinking to help plan spatially. As was evidenced this morning when I was nearly late for this, flood risks are becoming an increasing challenge because climate change is bringing the intensity and frequency of rainfall events at a greater level than we've ever had in human history. And so parks can play a role where there is appropriate to do so to try and retain more flood water and to manage water in a way that can support the reduction of flood risk for the communities that are around them. We also, from within the Wildlife Trust, really value the fact that they're very public facing. So interventions like we've created here at Lakeview Park, people can go and see with their own eyes and experience the changes in the seasons to see actively how nature can help support flood risk reduction. Some of our other projects are on farmland up in the top of the catchment that is detached and not publicly accessible, where we're installing ponds and leaky barriers and other features to slow the flow. And in those situations, the public aren't aware, whereas in this context, it's right on their doorstep. So for us, it starts with the literal starting point of the vision for the future. And when we talk to some of the local authorities in the last few years, they've not had the capacity to be able to even do management plans for some of their parks. If you start off by trying to plan for a more diverse, more integrated park function, considering the pros and cons and what features each park has, you can set yourself up for success. And bringing in other stakeholders like Wildlife Trusts to be a critical friend through that process can help add expertise, unlock funding and opportunities that you might not otherwise have. So a quick whistle-stop tour through a couple of case studies, the first of which is in Coventry, and this was done through Warwickshire Wildlife Trust, working in partnership with Coventry City Council, who are the owners and the site managers. And in this context, we were able to secure a multi-million pound, multi-year funding agreement from the National Lottery to support the River Sherborne. And over the course of a few years, we undertook a number of interventions across the park. Now, Lakeview Park is, as the name suggests, well, ironically, as the name suggests, there wasn't a lake there before. The River Sherborne runs through the middle. As you can see, there are lots of houses right on the doorstep with easy access to the park from the public. And so critical to the success of the project was understanding how people use the park, physically mapping their movements, talking to the community about what they wanted, helping to explain to them what could be achieved and getting that input from an early stage. We established a Friends of group and mapped out these opportunities with hydrological assessments. And the Google Earth view there on the left-hand side, you've got the park back in about 2000. 25 years later, you've got a number of different ponds and pools. The river has been reconnected with its floodplain in a number of different areas, but only less than 20% of the park has been modified. So people are still able to use it, walk their dog, play football, have picnics in the park. At the other end of the scale, you've got something equally impressive, Alsbury Park here in Derby, in partnership with Derbyshire Wildlife Trust. In this context, it's not a multi-million pound grant that makes it happen, it's actually doing less. So in the first instance, we've physically used machinery to modify the ground and had to plan out for that. In this instance, it's dialing back the intensity of the park. The commonality between these two is understanding the users of the park, trying to get buy-in from stakeholders and make sure that it's going to be sustainable. Because any of these changes, if people then rebel back against it, it's going to create extra work for you and the park managers. So rattling through to the end, in terms of practical next steps, I just wanted to sort of reiterate that we're here as a charity sector, wildlife trusts, national trust, RSPB and others, really genuinely wanting to help. We recognise the role that parks in all their forms can play in nature's recovery, and we're here to try and help support with collaboration, engaging the community, helping to understand what the community are trying to do. Sometimes we can have conversations with people without it escalating towards bin collections and all sorts of other challenges. And we can also access funding that might not be available to park managers. And then the final slide really is just to say, go easy on yourself. Actually, some of this is complicated. What we're trying to do is to change society and develop systems change. And there are a lot of components that are out of our control on this. So what we've tried to develop is a kind of a long-term infinite game kind of mindset, of understanding that some of these natural processes that we're trying to restore are fundamentally broken in the UK at the moment. Nature is not working as it naturally should. So we're trying to be nature-led as much as possible, but learning and adapting and evolving the plan based on user experience, based on what's working, what trees establish, what things die, is absolutely critical. And that constant evaluation and the building of the partnership working will hopefully set you all up for success in the future. Thank you very much.